Okay, so today we're going to hear from Lisa Robinson. So her journey into studying wild bees began with a natural science illustration class. Designing a xeric native garden brought wild things into their yard, and she was soon taking photos of the visitors, especially birds, and then focusing on the bees. After doing an illustration of an agapostamon, she met Dr. John Rolfs and volunteered to sort his bumblebees, naively thinking sorting by color patterns looked easy. She soon took both of Lincoln Best's 2019 bee courses and lucked out by joining the Oregon Bee Atlas just as it went online because of COVID. She has earned her master melittologist, and Lisa, this is where you're gonna have to correct me. What is your current master melittologist
I got journey
certification
level
level?
last year, so there's three of us. I think Ingrid and I and Carla, unless there's another one.
Woohoo! All
Yeah.
right. And so Lisa's one of the founders and a current board member of one. She can't seem to stop looking for wild bees wherever she goes. All
Yep.
right. So Lisa, will you
Okay.
share and take it
Ready?
away?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was. I'm still finishing up on the bumblebees because I'm still doing the database for Don Rolfs, and I really got to get it done because the people keep finding the bees that he found first, and I want him to get some credit for at least one of them. So that's what I should be doing instead of going to catch bees all over the state. This is a thing, I forgot where it was from, but it just has all different kinds of pollinators, and I'm just going to talk about all the different ways that I could find that something pollinates a flower. It's amazing what actually can pollinate flowers sometimes. And so here are four different things on buckwheat from my yard. And we got these are kind of a teal, greeny blue color with bright yellow. That's a beetle, a wasp, a bee. That's an Andrenocephobia we were talking about right there. And on the face, those two white vertical eyebrows, and then a butterfly. And I have tried to narrow it down to just one of each, but when we get to the things that are actually from Washington State, I may go over a little bit and add a few, so we'll see. I narrowed it down considerably so that it won't go over time. Mainly it's about patterns, and the patterns of different insects, animals, etc. can tell you what, and the way the flower is shaped can tell you what is pollinating it, and it's called mutualism. And then there's some that don't have anything to do with animals that are wind and water with darted. Biotic ones are biology, so pollinators of 88% of angiosperms. We actually have two crustaceans, possibly slugs and snails. Lizards, 37 have been documented. Mammals, over 100. Bats, over 500. And technically, bats are mammals, so that should be higher. Birds, over 1,000 maybe. Insects, over 1,000,000. Four cockroaches, beetles, moths and butterflies, flies, and a fungus, wasps and bees, and a couple other things that I'm going to show you, well, at least one other thing. So I did this for the Washington Native Plant Society, and so I was trying to make sure I talked about the plants mostly, but we'll try to get to the animals here for us. Basically, Charles Darwin didn't believe that any animal in the world performs an action for the exclusive good of another, of a distinct species. Yet each species tries to take advantage of instincts of others. Pardon me. So the bees are out to get pollen to feed their babies. Other things like wasps are getting nectar to its flight fuel so that they can fly and catch the things that they feed their larvae, because they don't actually eat crickets and spiders and things. They've put their eggs on them. So, synchrony in time and space. With climate change, things are coming out of order. The year that I did this spring ago, it's in 2024, early 2025, and I had bees in my yard, but none of my flowers had bloomed yet last year or the year before. And plants have cues to attract different kinds of animals. So, certain kinds of things smell, like for flies, they smell different than for moths. And they have direct rewards like pollen and nectar, but they can be very tricky sometimes. Um, some of the pollinators are built to transport pollen and some aren't. So our bees have pollen carrying hairs, but wasps don't. But they can still pollinate a little bit. And then pollinators that go to the same flowers over and over and over again do a lot more pollination than ones that bounce around. So, and then something like a butterfly, it tends to jump and fly and skitter around, and so it isn't staying all in one area like a bee, so it may spread genes further than the bees actually do. So they all have different jobs. And this is a pollination network from Oregon. I was in the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas, and then I did the Oregon Bee Atlas, and then I added the Washington Native Bee Society, and then I did the Washington Bee Atlas, and I've even been up in British Columbia taking a class from Link, so I've kind of got around a bit, and I do this like 24/7. I love it. It's crazy. I never liked bugs as a kid. Who knew this would happen to me? So when you're here for bee things, we talk about polyelectric as generalist bees that like all kinds of flowers, like bumblebees and honeybees. Oligoleges and oligolectic bees are more tightly tied to a particular kind, like asters or sunflowers, like the melisodes. We were talking about the sunflower longhorns. And then I found out there were monoleges, which is a bee that's only one plant. So later on, we'll have one of those. And they go where the conditions are right and the food is perfect for their needs. So starting with wind, we know about allergies in the spring. Grass and trees have a lot of wind pollinated, what am I trying to say? They're wind pollinated like evergreen trees and grasses. The trees that have flowers that bees go to, like maples, are not. This is a little tiny pollen, and this was an actual person who was kind enough to let me use her picture that was copyrighted. So I don't have the copyright thing there, though. I put the wrong one in. Anyway, it's called abiotic. Anemo is wind, however you say it. I like what Karen Wright says. Greek and Latin, Latin especially, is a dead language, and so you can say it however you try to say it. And Don Rolfs had a great idea. Whoever says it first, we all go with that, so nobody has their feelings hurt. So anemophily, perhaps, and then hydrophily or hydrophily. This plant is incredible. This is a picture from Mount Vernon. It looks like duckweed, but it actually has little stems and things. And depending upon if the flower is above the water or below the water, if it's above the water, it's wind pollinated, and if it's floating on the water, the pollen will float around and get to the flowers. And if it's under the water, it can float around underwater and pollinate the flowers, which is a three-way trifecta, which is pretty crazy and interesting. I've never seen this plant. Pond water starwort, but it's pretty cool. Malacophily, malaco, however you say it, mollusk, and phily is love, so that's always just the love or like of something. And this is only anecdotal, so people wonder if wild ginger might be pollinated by slugs, because slugs will go around getting into the flowers. And I really, really, really want banana slugs to be pollinators. Wouldn't that be just the coolest thing? But there really is, oops, come on, move, picture, thank you. There really is one paper about a snail that is a pollinator, and this one works when it's raining, and it's in India. And when it's raining, it's a morning glory bindweed kind of relative, and it slowly wanders across the flowers, and the pollen gets stuck on its shell. And when it's not raining and wet and cold, then the honeybees are out during the day in the sun, and they do the pollination. So it's a dual system. It's good to have a backup if you're a plant. You can't go anywhere if you're a plant for the most part, so you require things to haul your pollen and nectar around. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. I had 4 pictures of cockroaches originally. I just have one tonight, and because this is the one that's in America. This is a strawberry bush. It's in the east side of the U.S. somewhere, and ants pollinate it, and then these little tiny looking, because look how small that flower is, little tiny cockroaches come out at night. And so both of them work on it, and then there's some other like tropical cockroaches that do pollination too, which I was really surprised about. And lizards are really on islands. And when you have lizards on islands, a lot of times the islands don't have pollinators because it's hard for bees to fly across the ocean to get to the islands. And so I suppose that lizards have managed to float on a log or something to get there. And in this particular flower, in the time of the year when it's the driest, it blooms, and so it has watery nectar, and the lizards go up to get a drink, and then they get pollen stuck on their skin, hide, whatever you want to call it, and then this malungo tree gets pollinated. So they have to be tall enough to reach those anthers while they're climbing around. And and I think there was one in Los Angeles on the islands off of LA, but I couldn't find a lot of detail about that particular one. So I used one I knew I could find pictures of. And then we get to mammals and marsupials. So I learned that possums live in Australia and opossums live in North and South America, even though we call them possums sometimes too. And the flowers have to be a little sturdier for these guys to crawl around on them. This one has a prehensile tail, and a lot of these are night blooming eucalyptus flowers, and the little marsupials are getting nectar. And so they get pollen on their faces and their hairs, and they have grasping feet to get around on the plants. So the two plants are Banksia and eucalyptus. So all the eucalyptus that are here don't have their marsupials like the ones in California. This is a really weird plant in Brazil, and this is an opossum, and it has prehensile toes on its back legs, and it can tear open the bracts. And if you look right, the square edges, there's sort of bract things there, and it pulls those apart. And once it or a white-eared opossum or a ruby-crowned tanager tears up the bracts, then everybody can get into the nectar. So there's bees, wasps, and hummingbirds that'll come to this weird plant. Sorry, went too fast. Therophily, the NFMs, the non-flying mammals. So these things are often down inside of the branches, and they're hard to get to, and so little rodents, gerbils, mice, rats, kinkajous, monkeys, mongooses, lemurs, and shrews can find them. And this one's called a hedgehog lily, and I didn't get one with a picture of the critter. And then they also break in, and then the secondary pollinators can get into the flowers. And therizo means to harvest or to reap, so the animals are harvesting the flowers. And then y'all know birds, I'm sure. Long tubular red flowers for our birds. There's other birds like the ones in Hawaii. Are they honey creepers? Is that the right name? Different birds, they have a long narrow bill. Sometimes it's curved to fit a curved flower. And then the pollen either sticks to their bills or their feathers. They don't need a sense of smell, so they're just looking for the red. In this particular case, we have paintbrush, scarlet gilia, the flowering pink currants, salmon berries are pink, columbines are red, red penstemons. I grow the one from the southwest that's called firecracker, and it blooms before in June. It's my earliest red flower for hummingbirds. And it looks like some leaf cutters actually have taken some pieces out of this honeysuckle, doesn't it? The ones that are even and round are often leaf cutters. The ones that are raggedy are caterpillars. So ornis is bird in Greek. And I have an extra calliope hummingbird. And this is a thing I read, and I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but if you have overripe bananas and you don't want to make banana bread, if you put it out on a cup or something, and the fruit flies would come, and the hummingbirds, Doug Tallamy says, need 80% of their diet is actually insects and spiders. And I know they collect spider silk to make their nests, because their nests can stretch around their little babies. There's usually 2 in a little cup. But I would not do this anywhere near any fruit growing areas, because death to fruit flies over here. Especially spotted Drosophila would be really bad to grow those. So be careful about that if you decide to try it. Okay, and then there's incidental pollinators. So like this brown chestnut-backed chickadee is hopping around in the flowers, so it might be catching pollen and rubbing it around. There are no bird pollinators in mainland Europe. It's rare. But on European islands, it's common, which is kind of an interesting fact. So bats. Bats in tropical areas are fruit or nectar eating, but our bats are night flying insect eaters. So this doesn't work here. but it does work further south. And the flowers are kind of dull white green. They just need to be visual enough that the bat can find it at night. And they have a lot of dilute nectar and lots of pollen and a fruity fermenting odor that comes out at night when the bats are out. And so if you like a saguaro cactus, mangoes, bananas, I don't think we eat areca palms, but calabashes, sausage trees, kapok trees, guavas, and eucalyptus and agave, those ones are all pollinated by bats. And so I want to take a sidestep here to talk about moon gardens. I've always wanted to have a moon garden, but in my mind, a moon garden was a lot of white flowers around my porch. And I found out from the WDFW, the Fish and Wildlife Habitat page, that bats here need white flowers in meadows because they don't want to be flying into branches or posts or anything where they can hurt their wings. So if you have an open meadowy area and you can plant any white flowers that will bloom and smell good at night, then you'll attract moths, and then the bats will have more to eat. And if you plant larval hosts, which I'm still working on a list of that for moths, then it is moth week, by the way, then you'll raise more moths, and we need moths to feed the bottom of the food chain. Moths are super important caterpillars, so we need more of these guys. So plant some white flowers. Now we're going to go back to beetles for a minute. We'll get back to moths again. So these ones are called mess and soil pollinators. And magnolias were the first flowers that were pollinated way back in the millions of years ago. And beetles were probably the first pollinators of them. And they just wander around eating the pollen, mating, pooping, and then chewing on everything. And in that process, somehow they pollinate these things. So you may see them on goldenrod and spirea and yarrow and asters and sunflowers, or your magnolias here. And this is really cool. I got to see this. We were over in Snohomish, and there was about a foot of water in this creek sort of backed up, and all the skunk cabbages were popping out of the water, so I couldn't walk around and get a close picture. So these are INAT pictures that I borrowed. Skunk cabbage smells like skunk, and at the top of the plant, it has female flowers first. And then further down after that, it will have male flowers. And so they bloom at all different times, and these beetles have to go back and forth between the plants to pollinate them. And so, yeah, I actually saw beetles in the swamp, but it was out in the water, so I didn't want to go wading, and it was cold. And anyway, it's pretty cool that they do that. I thought that was neat. And then you might see a lot of these. So this is a buckwheat, which is an umbel. So it has lots of little balls of flat flowers like this sticking out that these guys just sort of hang out on, and they don't go anywhere hardly ever, and they don't move. They're really easy to take photographs of. So start there and then work up to bees maybe, I don't know. Different kinds, and longhorn beetles, checker beetles, soldier beetles, and pintail beetles. I'm not going to say their names because I don't know how to murder them too much. And there's some of them are really pretty. There's a yellow velvet beetle that is yellow, kind of a greenish gold color, and it looks like it's made of velvet. It has little hairs all over it, and it's really pretty when you find one of those. Okay, this one is where the Sarlacc Pitt comes from. This was the weirdest one I think I found. And when a water lily opens, it has these cup-like centers that have sweet liquid inside, and then all of the they're not anthers, all of those things around it are flexible and thin, and they're inner stamens, and as the insect comes to get to the sweet smelling liquid, they bend down inside and the insect falls inside. It might drown, it might be able to get out, it has to be able to get through all those bendy things that are trying to keep it in. So I couldn't find anything that said that the plant absorbed any, like the plants that eat insects. It's not like that. So I think they just have to get out, or they don't make it, and that's all there is to it. But then they close up in the evening, and then the next day they release pollen, and there's no longer any water hazard inside. And when the pollen is released, then the bee has to go from a pollen presenting flower over to the pollen pit and fall in to get washed off. So it's a very strange way of doing things. And then the plant closes up and it goes like a spring and it goes underwater and it pulls itself down below the water, and it makes its seeds underwater, and they have an aril, which is an edible part, and then they sort of float around in the water and things eat them for the arils and then either poop them out or spit them out. I don't know which. I didn't write that down, and now I don't remember. Pretty weird. Okay, so back to moths. So here's some more white flowers, and I really, really, really want to find some coyote tobacco. I would expect that there was a lot more coyote tobacco before colonization because it was part of the pipe ceremonies that the native people here used. It smells good. It's not a very fancy plant, but Nicotiana is a cultivar of tobacco that smells wonderful at night, so I think it would probably be similar. This would be the one that pollinators would definitely use, though, and so someday I'm going to find this and get some seeds. Catchfly is another one. Stick seeds, which are the white forget-me-nots. They grab onto you and stick on your pants like Velcro. And then the wild tobaccos would all be good moth plants. And feed those bats. Okay, so Darwin had seen this moth. I don't know if you can see it. It's really small. There's a line right there where its tongue is this long and it is going down that thing, which doesn't even fit in the picture.
Sorry, one second, Lisa. I don't mean to interrupt you. I actually know somebody who has that plant, so let
Wow.
yeah, let me know after. He's also doing a ton of research on moths and larvae associates. Let's talk
Awesome.
later. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So Darwin knew that because of this tongue, there had to be a plant that goes with it. But it took 41 years for someone to find the plant, which isn't too bad, really, considering it's probably a tropical thing in the jungle or something like that. And I'm going to show you a bee that has a similar feature later on. This is one we have. So back to those dogbanes and snowberries and honeysuckles. Apparently, this is like a horn, like a tomato hornworm. I didn't find a better picture, unfortunately. And they have clear wings, so they're moths that look like bumblebees. You can see the yellow hairs. You can see the adaptation of the antenna that are not like a normal moth. And it has a kind of a round rump like a bee. And it has color on its leg like a bee, like it's carrying pollen, but it's just hair. And they fly in the daytime. I've never found one of those moths. They're probably, larvae, sorry. They probably hide under the leaves and they're sort of look like they're in the shade, so hard to find. But I have lots of snowberries, so I should have some. Or dogbane, whichever it is. Sorry. Okay, this one, there is a agave redworm. So the worm that's in mescal is actually a caterpillar. They're called maguey worms. That would be a Spanish something, I think. The Mayan people actually, I think, ate them. And now they're becoming popular as a food item. And so to get to those, they have to chop up the agaves, which means there's less mescal. So that's kind of an issue right now for them. But we have our own version. And if you've seen a prairie star, this little moth lays its eggs in the prairie star. And then depending upon where it is, sometimes it's mutual and there's not a problem. And sometimes the moths their eggs are aborted by the plants. And so if there's a lot of other pollinators, like I've actually seen bumblebees on these flowers. It's really funny because the bumblebee is so big, the whole flower bends over into an arch. And then when the bumblebee lets go, it goes boing and stands back up. So whenever there's a lot of pollinators, then they get enough seeds to outweigh the moths. And when there aren't a lot of pollinators, then the plants actually abort their own seeds in order to keep the larva from coming on alive and growing up. So it's interesting. There were 4 different sites in this one paper that talked about that. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool that we had something like that. And here's a cutaway showing you how the moth lays its eggs inside. And then I had trouble with psychophily because I was thinking of psychopath and not Psyche, who is the goddess or whatever of the embodiment of the soul. So if you see pictures of butterflies or a girl with butterfly wings, which I always thought were fairies, this is Psyche. And this Lurkwin's caterpillar is like bird poop, so you probably didn't ever notice it, or didn't look closely. And these flowers, they have long tongues like that one from Darwin, which was a moth. Bright colors, day flying. They need a lot of nectar. I have a swallowtail that loves my lavender, which must not be nearly long enough for its tongue. But swallowtails, and fritillaries, I think, actually pollinate flame azaleas back east, like in North Carolina. So you can see how the wing of the butterfly, when it flutters, it would touch these tall anthers. And so that these ones especially are fluttery. The swallowtails flutter the most, and so they do more of the pollination. And maybe this happens in our rhododendrons and our azaleas. So keep your eyes out and see if you can spot somebody doing that. I don't know. I've only read about this one. And this is a cool butterfly that I want to call it a fritillary, and it's not. It's a Argynnis coronus. I found out about these because there's another species that the Woodland Park Zoo is working with because it's endangered or extinct in Washington, and it lives by the ocean, and they are violet. They grow the larvae on violets, I think, there too. But this one definitely is a violet obligate. And the butterflies lay their eggs in the violets. There, we'll go to the violets. And then the little caterpillars wait a minute. They lay their eggs in the violets that are dead in the fall. The little egg and the little caterpillar hang out over winter and come back in the spring, grow up, become butterflies, mate, and then the females, for the most part, fly up into the alpine areas around our wilderness area here by Leavenworth, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams. They spend the summer drinking from the alpine flowers and not having to worry about how dry and crusty it gets out here in eastern Washington. And then they fly back down and they lay their eggs in these dry flowers, so the babies know that there's going to be a violet there in the spring for them, which is just phenomenal. And then toxicity is a survival mechanism, just throwing this in as a random thought. There's a lot of things that live on milkweed and I always want to say snowberry. It's dogbane. And these things are bright blue and shiny, shiny, shiny. Not very big, because the whole flower is like a quarter of an inch. And that's a milkweed bug, and that's a milkweed beetle borer. And that's a monarch butterfly, which they need milkweed, and they don't taste so good, so that's why they are on the milkweed, so they can be toxic to other things, and they won't get eaten. This is a fly, Myophily. So they like white, purple, blue, or violet flowers that are open and easy to get to. I see a lot of these guys with these long proboscises in lavender, and they have to fly in and out like a needle. They can't fold their tongues like a bee, so they fly in and out of the flowers. And then these ones are bombyliid, so they bomb anything that looks like a hole, including an eyelet in your shoe, and any egg that gets down a bee burrow then grows up to be something that eats up the bee larva or the bee pollen or something like that. So they like composite sandworts, mustard, and limaceans, and I see a lot of these little guys. They look like flying pussy willows to me. Usually they're silvery or golden, not orange. But this is a really cool bee. So this bee, the larva is a green or brown that's actually a maggot because it's a fly. And they don't have any eyes and they don't have any legs. And the mom lays the egg by the aphids, and then they grow up and they eat, depending on who you read, 400 to 600 aphids each. And they have 5 to 7 generations a year. So these are aphid eating machines, and you want hoverflies or syrphid flies in your yard, which means you can't spray all the aphids or they won't have anything to eat in order to do all of that work. And apparently Washington State University said peas, kale, and lilies are fly pollinated. So these guys actually do all that work. And this one is pollinated by a mosquito. There's snow pool mosquitoes. They're in the same family as the ones that give us some of the diseases, but I don't know if they have them because they live way up where it's cold, and they grow in the snowmelt pools, and they're at 1,500 feet and above, and they drink nectar from the spurs. So you can see the little pointed part of the flower there, and then this is what happens. Pollinium sticks to their eyeballs. So those are like little purses full of pollen, and when they go to the next plant, then it somehow gets scraped off in the plant and pollinates the flower. So that's a wild one. They look like little bunny ears to me. And then there's ones that smell like dead meat, and this is one of the tricky ones because the flies think they're getting carrion, and they're laying their eggs on carrion, which will feed their babies, but it doesn't, because it's a flower. So they're just moving the pollen around, and the fly eggs probably don't even grow, or they starve. I don't know really for sure what happens, but so there's some really stinky trilliums out there somewhere. It says they live in Idaho. It's called the Idaho trillium. And then we have one corpse flower that I know of. It's a WSU, and it's in Vancouver, and it has bloomed, as of 3 years ago, it had bloomed 3 times, which is unusual. They don't bloom usually very commonly, and then this one's just going to town. And that thing is a spathe, is actually a bract, and they actually cut a hole. Look how thick that thing is. And then they pollinated it by hand because we don't have whatever flies would come to this in Vancouver, Washington. It's probably a tropical flower. It's pretty wild. I can't imagine having that smell in your office. And this is the strangest one. So this one, jackfruit males have to get fungus, and the midges have to go and get the pollen from the stinky males that have fungus and take it to the females and pollinate the fruit. And if there isn't a fungus, they're not attracted to the jackfruit, and then it would not produce fruit, so we wouldn't have jackfruit to eat. I've never tasted one. I don't know what it's like, but it was only discovered to do this in 2018. They just figured this out recently. So there's always new things in science to find out if you just pay attention and look closely enough at the weirdest things. And this one I had just found the day I was doing this talk, and there are a bunch of velvet ants that are male. The males all have wings, and the females look like ants, and so they're called velvet ants, and they actually use bees. They're parasitic of bees, and the females live in the ground, and the males have to find them, so they are able to fly around. And they said that all the pictures on iNaturalist, the males have some pollen on them, so they think they must be some kind of pollinator. They like carrots, asters, spurges, and buckthorns, and legumes. So that's one that somebody could work on if they felt like it. And then our wasps use nectar for flight fuel. So all the adult wasps are just drinking nectar, and then they go off and find their cricket or their spider or whatever it is that they are programmed to collect. Then they take it to a burrow, they sting it to parasitize it. So that's where the stingers came from originally. And then they lay an egg in the critter, and it eats all of the things that are not necessary first, so that the poor paralyzed spider or cricket or whatever is just being eaten alive from the inside out. And then there's sometimes 3 in a nest, so it has the baby larva has to move to the next one and the next one. But that's just with one kind of wasp, because then there's the parasitoid wasps that you see, the little caterpillars with the cocoons sticking out all over. That's a whole different system. And we have a set of pollen wasps that actually collect pollen and nectar. They eat it and take it home in their crop, and they make a mud tube for their babies. And all the ones in penstemons are always Vespoides, so this one up here. And the ones in Phacelia are either Edwardsi, which is this one, or Zonalis. And they all have these knobs on the ends of their antennae. So they have short antennae if they're females, and long antennae that really stick out if they're males. And they look like bembex on the back end. So if you have Phacelia or penstemons, you may see these. And there's also a bee that went back to eating meat that lives in the Central America. They call them vampire bees. So how did bees get here from wasps? There's wasps called Ammoplanidae, and they ate thrips. And thrips are down there all over the flowers, full of pollen. And so they think that bees were Ammoplanidae that just started eating more pollen and more pollen until they turned into bees. But they're still a wasp, which makes it really hard to figure out where to put them in the iNaturalist sometimes. Whoops, sorry. So they can see UV, and I don't remember why I put that in here, just because I liked it, I guess. They are keystone pollinators. They are the best pollinators. We're not going to talk about them very long, though, because I'm gone long enough. That is a flavifrons. No, it's got yellow down there. That's a bifarius, not a bifarius anymore. Bombus nearcticus vancouverensis. And so they can get up into this thing up here and get the nectar. They have to kind of pry those petals open. So big, strong bumblebees are useful for that. The bees have specialized hairs for carrying pollen. This one is why I talked about the moths with the long tongue. Well, this bee has long legs, and it goes with this plant, and it has to be able to put a leg down each of those horns to scrabble the oil out. And these are in South Africa, and I think that our Elizabeth Murray and Silas Bossert helped work on this group. So you've seen Megachile. They look like puffballs, and there's all the hairs that collect the pollen. We have, like I said, specialist bees. So Perdita nevadensis, the Nevada mining bee, is a buckwheat specialist. And then look at the specialized hairs that different Perdita have. From Zach Portman, who's in Minnesota or Michigan. I always mix those two up. Sorry, Zach. But look at the balls on the ends of these hairs, and what in the world? I would love to know whether that's for what kind of plant that's for. And Perdita are really small, so they have sparse. They don't have very thick hairs, and then they pick up pollen, and it's like one pollen here and one pollen there because they are so small. The smallest one is 2 millimeters, and that's not a very big bee. And then the oil bee, like the one Rediviva, this is in the same family, Mellididae, and this is our oil collecting bee, which we have to find more of. This plant, which is Lysomachia ciliata. So if you know that plant, it's probably blooming now, and they may be out at the moment, or it might be over already. I might have missed it this year. And then our monolege, Death Camas and Andrina astragalus. Unfortunately, somebody caught it on astragalus and named it for that instead of Death Camas. And there's that yellow beetle, the velvet beetle I was talking about. And weirdly, the drone fly, which is actually a rat-tailed maggot. So if you have any standing water that mosquitoes can live in, so can these. They can collect pollen and stuff better than hoverflies and syrphid So there's more of them than there should be, and less of the hoverflies that eat the aphids. So don't leave standing water around because of them, as well as mosquitoes. And Jim Kane talked about them right after my talk before, so we have a video about this one. And then some plants are so deceitful they look like a bee. So the males get duped into coming, they smell like a bee too, coming to try to mate with this flower, and then they end up with pollinia all over them, and then they don't get lucky. So it's very deceitful on the plant's part. Okay, and then here is my favorite pollinator. It's a predator. It's an Ethiopian wolf.
Many plants are pollinated by flying animals.
And we want to skip ahead till we get to the wolves.
The red-hot poker, or Nyphophia foliosa, is endemic to high mountains of Ethiopia, and its bright flowers bloom from June to November. The flowers produce a sweet nectar that draws in birds and insects, but also coaxes the wolves away from their usually carnivorous diet. Last year, we followed several wolves feeding on the Nyphophia flowers. We discovered that some individuals visited up to 30 stalks during a single foraging trip. So far, this makes the Ethiopian wolf the only large carnivorous predator reported feeding on nectar. As the wolves foraged among the flowers and
But I'm going to close it. There we go. Go away. Okay. Thank you for listening. And if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wow, Lisa, that was epic.
Thank you. Isn't it interesting how many different kinds of things can pollinate stuff? I was really surprised at what I found. And this wolf, by the way, there's about 800 of them left in the world. I want to find the Save the Ethiopian Wolf people and give them some money to help because they're so cool. And Nefofas are a hummingbird plant here, I think.
All right, so does anybody have questions for Lisa? Well, my question is, when is this going up on YouTube? Because I feel like I need to pause on each slide and go down an internet rabbit hole learning about each of these species for
Yeah,
about an
it
hour.
took me a whole 5 weeks to put this together because I kept trying to find ones that were local, and then I'd go off on these tangents, and it was a crazy thing to do. But yeah, I put all the information there, and then I couldn't talk about any of it.
All right, so it looks like we have a hand from Linda Zoll.
Hi, I guess
Hi,
I'll
Lisa.
turn my picture on. Hello.
Yeah, well, oh gosh, I'm already in my pajamas, but if you want to
That's
see
okay.
me
No, you're
too, I
fine. You're
can.
fine.
No obligation.
It's up to you. We don't care.
Anyway, I just wanted to first of all say hi and thank
Hi.
you. Um, I wanted to say that I wanted to ask you if I could get your email because this would be a great talk to give to my honeybee club
Oh,
because
fun. Yeah.
so often people just start thinking that bees are the only pollinators, and so I'd love to have that.
There you go. It's in the chat.
They
All right, any other questions?
Um, Lisa, the gentleman I know who collects the seeds is he collects them from Eastern Washington and everything. I should be able to get the location. He collected the
Sure.
Nicotiana you were looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Um, I want to know what your favorite pollinator is. Anybody like one of the weird ones that I found or know about one I haven't found? That'd be even better. Whoa, an evening primrose that was 6 to 7 feet tall, and you could watch the moths at night. Yeah, the hummingbird moths are very cool.
I think the most surprising one for me is the green bottlebee.
Oh, yeah, aren't they like bot flies or something? Or
You
is
know,
that a
they're
different?
they're the they're the first to dog poop and dead stuff, and
Oh, ew,
they
yeah,
are they are amazing pollinators, and I always
they're
found that
so pretty.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know that. That's good to know.
I started I started looking at I got a couple of potter wasps last week
Hmm.
and I never actually looked really closely at the mouth parts. Some
Hmm.
of them actually have quite long tongues.
Ooh, interesting.
So I might I do wonder if they have some sort of level of preference
Obligate.
with flowers
Yeah,
they feed on.
yeah. There's so many wasps, and there's way more than bees. And there's 24,000 bees now. I guess the count's gone up, but wasps are way more numerous. So there's so much to find out still.
You mentioned Pollinia with the
Yeah,
mosquitoes. I
yeah.
always find that showy milkweed quite fascinating because of the chain, the Pollinia chains. And
Hmm.
someone just came out with a paper about honeybees getting caught in the flowers. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
Hmm.
That honeybees often get caught in the flowers, and I found that very interesting.
Yeah, you'll find them hanging
And
by one leg, and
yeah,
they're trapped.
yeah, and orchids also have very strange pollinia. They're not grains. They're little things that end up on the thorax of the bee. And so
Yeah,
on iNaturalist, sometimes you can see them stuck on the thorax of the bee, which
yeah.
is
Or they'll
really,
be like on the end of the foot, like they're carrying a
yeah,
purse.
yeah,
They're very, yeah. And I guess some of the orchids, there's like a hole. The bee has to go in like I think it's a lady slipper. They go in the lady slipper and they can't figure out how to get back out, and they have to go through the back and go through a hole that's too
right.
small for them, and then it sticks all the stuff on them as they go out, and then the next one tricks the bees. They don't learn, so they go through another orchid and leave them and pollinate the next orchid.
And another thing that's fascinating is the size and the shape of the pollen grains themselves, and to see those
Mm.
under an electron microscope, that is
Mm-hmm.
so fascinating because it's just like a whole other world.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I'm thinking maybe we can take one last question or comment and then close out the meeting.
Or just close out the meeting and say
Or just
goodnight.
close out the meeting. All right. Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
everybody.
much, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thanks
being
everybody
a
for
tech
coming.
tech person. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good night.